Snow lay thick on Cedar Creek, turning its crooked lanes to pale veins of light beneath the winter moon. The two limestone spires of First Methodist stood sharp against the frozen sky, their bells silent, their windows glowing faintly with the breath of steam from within. It was there, on a night of ice and wind in 1878, that Ellen Hartwell crept into the church with a key clenched in her shaking hand. The young substitute teacher meant only to understand what had gone wrong in her Sunday school records, but when she lifted a loose plank in the basement, what she found would stain the town's soul forever. The leather ledger beneath the floorboards smelled of damp ink and dust, its pages thick with names written in Margaret Wilson's careful hand, 50 children, all marked as transferred, none of them ever seen again. Each line bore the details of a child's age, strength, temperament, and beside it, a sum of money. Timothy Morrison, 8 years old, obedient. Sturdy, sold for $85 to Chicago Textile Interests. Mary Catherine Phillips, 10. Bright, polite, sold for $120 to Louisville Domestic Services. The columns ran on in calm, perfect handwriting, as though they recorded nothing more than tithe offerings. Ellen sank to her knees, lantern trembling. These were not records of education. They were invoices. The children's biblical excursions had been nothing but well-dressed disappearances. She turned more pages and found Sarah Coleman's neat, cruel notes on conditioning methods. Build guilt through Scripture. Replace maternal attachment with divine duty. Instill obedience through confession. There were sample letters written in Sarah's flowing script, pretending to be from the missing children, letters that spoke of joy, learning, gratitude, all lies meant to soothe the parents who asked too many questions. Cedar Creek had been built on coal, prayer, and trust. The railroad had brought wealth and strangers alike. Margaret Wilson, the strict but saintly head of the Sunday school, was a figure of reverence in a town that believed virtue could be read in posture and diction. Robert Hayes, the church's great benefactor, owned mines, shops, and hearts. His donations had built the church's grand basement classrooms. Sarah Coleman, soft-spoken and devout, had a voice that could calm the wildest child. They were the holy trinity of respectability. And behind them, a trade in flesh that ran through 4 states. By the time Ellen began to suspect the truth, 2 years had passed and 50 children were gone. She'd seen how parents stopped mentioning their missing sons and daughters, how grief folded itself into silence. It wasn't ignorance. It was the quiet bargain every frightened heart made to protect its place in a respectable pew. That night in the basement, she also found fragments of intercepted letters, scrawled by small hands. "Mama, they said you didn't want me. I work with the big machines. My hands hurt. The lady says God will forgive me if I do what she asks, but I feel wrong inside." Each was marked by Sarah's pencil. Non-compliant. Reassign. The next morning, Ellen packed the ledger, the false letters, and Sarah's diary into a canvas satchel and rode through the sleet to the county courthouse. Judge William Marshall read until his face turned white. Telegraph lines hummed that same night. Chicago, Louisville, St. Louis, and at dawn, raids struck warehouses and factories. 11 children were found alive, thin as ghosts, their eyes flickering with something too tired to be called fear. Margaret, Sarah, and Hayes were arrested at the rail depot trying to flee west with forged papers and bags of cash. The town woke to disbelief. In court, the evidence spoke louder than sermons. The 3 had made over $75,000, an empire of pain built on faith. Margaret claimed she had given opportunities to the poor. Hayes said he was only a sponsor. Sarah smiled faintly through the proceedings, unrepentant, as though her notebooks of human conditioning were works of art. 18 children were recovered. 12 were confirmed dead. 20 were never found. The rescued ones were scarred in body and spirit, burned lungs from lint-filled mills, missing fingers, and eyes that darted at every shadow. Many refused to return home, unable to believe their parents had not sold them willingly. The Methodist leadership blamed individual corruption and moved quickly to preserve its image. No reforms, no restitution, only silence. Cedar Creek's families, broken by shame and grief, left one by one. Businesses closed. The town's proud church became a monument to denial. Ellen Hartwell, the woman who had saved what lives she could, found herself unwelcome in the community she'd defended. Parents avoided her. Churches declined to hire her, and newspapers called her a hysterical schoolmarm. She moved often, teaching wherever she could, her insistence on written accountability making her an outcast among educators who preferred trust to scrutiny. She never married, never returned to Cedar Creek, but wherever she went, she carried with her the lesson the town refused to learn, that evil does not always wear a mask. It often wears a collar and carries a hymn book. Decades later, the old church still stood, its twin towers whitening with age. Locals claimed that on cold nights when the wind swept down from the mines, a faint tapping could be heard beneath the floorboards, like a pencil scratching across paper or a child's hand knocking from the dark. And those who knew the story would lower their voices and say, "It's just Miss Hartwell, still counting the names, making sure we never forget them again."